everybody, this is Debbie Williams. I'm a grants management specialist for the FPAC Business Center, but I want you to know that this video is not an official video produced by the FPAC Business Center or by the USDA. This is only my personal attempt to assist you with filling out the forms required for a package for an agreement or amendment that you're going to submit to the Grants and Agreements Division. The topic of this video is the SF424 forms, and I want you to know, first of all, that the partner is responsible for filling out these forms. However, you may find that they are confused by certain items in these forms, and I want you to be able to assist them when they need it. So let's start with where to find these forms in the first place. You go to a site called grants.gov, and at the top of their homepage, you'll see multiple tabs. You go to the Forms tab, choose SF424, and it will take you to a menu that looks like this. I'm going to start with the SF424 form itself, so I will download the PDF. But I also want you to know that they do offer some instructions if you need some additional help with doing this form. So you can download that as well. The SF424 form looks like this. Some of the items in the form are very self-explanatory, and some of them are the ones that you probably will need to assist on if the partner is asking for help. So you've got the type of submission, the type of application, the date received is the date they're filling out the form. The applicant fills in their legal name, their tax ID information, and their organizational DUNS, which is the number that identifies them in the System for Award Management, which is also called SAM. Then their address, their organizational unit, if they are organized that way, and the name and contact information for the person to be contacted on the agreement. So generally, this is the person that you would ask questions about the agreement itself. It may not be the person who's authorized to sign this form or the person who's authorized to sign the agreement itself. In item 9, you fill in the type of applicant, and there's a drop-down menu for this. You choose whether it's a state government, a tribe, a university, whatever applies to that partner, what kind of entity they are. In item 10, you fill in the federal agency that the agreement is with. So in FPAC, we deal with NRCS, FSA, or RMA. For this example, I'm going to choose NRCS. When you get to the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance Number, otherwise known as CFDA, you would fill in the CFDA for the program involved in this agreement. If you don't know how to find the CFDA, you can go to the CFDA website, or in the case of an NRCS program, you can go to the FPAC Grants and Agreements SharePoint, and the guidance section of their customer assistance has a list of the authorities, the NRCS authorities, which also includes CFDA numbers. The spreadsheet looks like this, and I'm going to use CTA as an example. So I go down to CTA on the funding source, go across past the authorities, and here you will see in the third column the CFDA number. So for CTA, the CFDA number would be 10.902. That is the number that I would fill in here on block 11. And then I would write the CFDA title. So I'd write Conservation Technical Assistance, or CTA. The funding opportunity number generally applies to amendments because you would already have an agreement number, and the agreement number would go here. Then the title of the agreement would go here. But if it's a new agreement, you could also name the agreement based on what is going on in the agreement itself. Competition ID number only applies to a competed agreement, or a competed award, excuse me. Those would be ones in which an NFO was advertised on grants.gov and awarded. So you would put the NFO, the competition ID number here, and the title of that NFO. Then you've got a description of the project itself. So just a brief summary of what's going on with this agreement. Now here's one that often gets a question because people don't know what their congressional districts are. So you need the district of the applicant themselves and the district for the program or project where it's going to occur. I use handy dandy Google to find this information. So you can type congressional district map into Google, and usually this is the item that comes up first. It's a site called GovTrack US, and this map that they offer is really wonderful because it shows you the entire United States and identifies every congressional district in the United States. So you can choose based on where your partner is located and also where the project is taking place. Now you may notice some states, like here in Wyoming, you see Wyoming at large. That means that they only have one congressional district, which in the case of some of your agreements, you may have a program or a project that takes place in the entire state. So you'd put the abbreviation for the state and then hyphenate it and just write all in there, because that would mean it includes all of your state. Next, we have item 17. The start date is not the date that you're filling out this form. It is the start date for the agreement itself. So it's the date that you anticipate having the agreement executed and ready for work to begin. The end date will be the anticipated expiration for the agreement. Then in the estimated funding, you would include the federal portion, and if there are going to be other contributions, you would include the applicant or the state or the local or the other sources of funding. If you anticipate program income, you should also fill that in here. Now here's another item, number 19, that often confuses people. Is the application subject to review by state under the Executive Order 12372? Well, the first time I filled out this form, I didn't know what that was either. So I used Google again, and I typed in State Executive Order 12372, which takes you to multiple sites that'll help you to determine whether or not your state is subject to State Executive Order 12372. And so you just have to kind of do a little research to find out if your state is subject to that or not. And then you answer that section of the SF424 accordingly. You also tell whether you're delinquent on any federal debt or not. And if you are, you need to provide the explanation of that and attach any documentation that's applicable. Make sure you agree to this statement here, and then fill in the contact information and name of the person who signs the form. So that completes your SF424. And now we're going to go on to the SF424A, which is the detailed budget for the agreement or amendment. You put your grant program or your function or activity here and the CFDA number here. For a new agreement or an amendment, you'd put your federal amount here, non-federal amount here if there is some, and the total will self-populate based on what you fill in. On page 2, you complete an itemized budget based on the object class categories. So you break your total budget into personnel, fringe benefits, travel, equipment. Now with equipment, keep in mind that those are generally items that are over $5,000 and are not expendable. If your item does not fall into that category, then you should put it in supplies. And then there are contractual items, construction items, and other. You'll get the total of your direct charges here. And if your partner is going to claim indirect charges based on being eligible to apply a NICRA, or whether they choose to do a de minimis cost rate, you would include those charges here. The direct charges determine what your indirect charges are, because you apply the indirect charge only to the direct charges themselves, not to the total funding for the agreement. Some people get confused on that, so I want to make sure you understand that. The direct charges only are what you determine the indirect charges based on. And then, of course, you put the program income down here in block 7, and that page is complete. Page 3 of the 424A, if you have a partner contributing, then you would start with block 8. You fill in what the name of your program is, the applicant's contribution, or sometimes it's the state that's the contributing partner, so you would put that here. Or if it's applicant and state, you'd fill both of them in, other sources, and again, the totals self-populate. Now, if you have just a one-year agreement, you'll fill this in based on what you anticipate the costs being for the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. You do that for the federal amount, and you do that for the non-federal amount as well. If you have a multi-year agreement and you know what the amounts are going to be for all 5 years, you're going to fill in this section. And this is where some people get kind of confused, because this says first, second, third, and fourth, but we're actually looking for future funding periods here. So year 1 of the agreement goes up here in blocks 13 and 14. And then 16B would be year 2 of the agreement. And this is year 3 of the agreement, and year 4 and year 5 as applies to your agreement. If you don't know what the funding is going to be in the second year, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, you only fill out this block. The direct charges are whatever you had on page 2 under direct charges, and then the indirect charges go here. Now, if you put indirect charges on this agreement, usually what I put in the remarks section is what the indirect cost rate was. And I'll show you what I mean by that in the example that I'm about to show you. So here is a filled out SF424A. This is a really simplified one, so I'm going to go quickly through. This shows the federal amount. It shows the amount that the partner is going to contribute, and then it totals here. Go down to the second page. This budget is super easy because this is a task order agreement, so all of the expenses fall into contractual. My direct charges end up being $100,900 for the federal, $21,402.72 for the partner. Now remember again that direct charges determine what the indirect charges are. So I go across to here and I look at my my direct charges. I would take the indirect cost rate and apply it to this amount. So 122,302.72 times whatever my percentage is for my indirect cost rate. Put that amount here and then add it as part of the total budget for the agreement itself. Now you notice in this one, the partner is choosing to absorb all of the indirect costs as part of their contribution. So it's not being applied to the federal share at all. On page 3 of this form, I've shown this is a state entity. So I put their contribution under state. And even though this agreement is a 5-year agreement, we only know what the first year funding is going to look like. So I filled out this for year 1 of the agreement. If I did know how much was going to be applied in the second, third, fourth, and fifth years, I would fill this out for those years. Down at the bottom, I put the direct charges here, indirect here, and in the remarks, I include what the indirect charges are based on, what the rate is. And in this case, the entity is using the de minimis cost rate of 10%. So that concludes my explanation of how to fill out these forms. But one last thing that I want you to be aware of is if this is a construction agreement or a construction program, you need to be aware that instead of doing the SF424A, you would do the SF424C. So please be aware of that. For the majority of the time, you're going to be using the A, but in the case of a construction, you would use the SF424C. I hope this video has been helpful to you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.